And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
There are now 9 factions for Battleground Fantasy Warfare. You don't know what that is? That's the game that uses cards with miniatures on, and instead of having actual miniatures on the table, you put the cards down and you move the cards around. You can write in the card, marking off damage. It's very fun. You get a whole army in a small set. Well, one of the fans of the game decided to make a campaign system for the game, something that allowed you to play several campaigns in a row or several scenarios in a row and tie them together in a bit of a logical way, and also in a way that you can use it to play tournaments or such. But really, when I look at the campaign, the Kingdoms expansion for Battleground Fantasy Warfare, I look at it as a scenario generator with the campaign as a bonus. Because I don't have enough time usually to play a full campaign, but I have enough time to play the random scenarios. To generate a random scenario, you're going to be using this mustard chart here, and when doing so, you roll 2 six-sided dice, you see what the result is, and then you look at the chart here. So for example, I rolled a 6. We'll be playing a blue campaign. That allows me to use, I have to use at least 4 core units. I'm allowed to use standard units, and I can use up to 2 elite units. I cannot use mercenaries in this battle. And that's basically the extent of it. Now, just as a quick side thing, whenever I play this for a scenario, I often re-roll anything that's in the lower things because the 2 lowest numbers don't allow you to use elite units. And while that might be fun and strategic for some people, to me the elite units are the major part of the game. To me, they add the most interesting parts. But anyway, you roll that, you see what symbol you get. So for example, here I rolled the blue symbol. Then you'll be going through a whole pile of these cards here, which have different kinds of scenarios on them. You'll randomly pull one, and then we look at this card. Does it have a blue symbol at the top? Yes, then we can use it. So this shows here how this scenario is going to work. The attacker here gets 2,200 points. The defender gets 2,000 points. Both players get 4 command actions per turn. And then it tells you exactly how the game works. The attacking player has to choose one group, and in this scenario, and the attacker has to divide his units into 3 groups in this scenario. But that's not the only thing. Players will then draw a random card from this pile, which shows a scenario that we'll be using in this battle. It shows where the terrain goes, where the defender deployment zone is, where the attacker deployment zone is, and so this, between drawing one of these cards and one of these, you have quite a few options. I am looking forward to seeing maybe an expansion because while I think these are neat that they have all these terrain cards, I would like to see more terrain. If you're wondering where the terrain comes from, you can get it in a terrain pack, which is basically just a book, and you cut out the terrain from it. It looks really nice. I think the terrain pack is really well done, and you can put that on the table. You don't need that though. The rule book says that you can use felt or some other way to build your battlefield. So you build your battlefield and then you follow the scenario according to whatever the card says. Now here's the Battlegrounds Fantasy Warfare rule book. It's a little small for my taste, but they have a larger size one which I printed off the internet. And more than that, I printed off the 2 papers that are needed for the campaigns. A campaign is made up of 10 scenarios, although technically I suppose you could play it with 9 according to the rules. I don't really see how that makes too much of a difference. You can play it so that you're facing off against different opponents each turn, like a tournament style, or you could play against the same person each time, and that way it feels more like a war, where I'm going into the next battle after this one. At the beginning of the game, each person has a certain amount of gold and a certain amount of victory points, which are shown on this score sheet here. And then the players are going to be purchasing a building. Now, what buildings can they purchase? It's determined by this spreadsheet. For example, at the beginning of the game, you have the farm, which lets you recruit core units. So in your first battle, you're only using core units. But after that, if you want, you can buy the mine, which allows you to recruit elite units, or you can buy the logging camp, which lets you get standard units. Then you can, after you buy the logging camp, you have more choices. You could buy the sawmill. That gives you an extra gold each turn, which allows you to build more buildings. Or you can buy the watchtower, which allows you to see what your enemy does before you put units on the board. Or then you can start recruiting mercenaries. Or you get an extra victory point in case the game comes down to that. And so this is very interesting. I'm kind of surprised at the very heavy emphasis on the Mercenaries expansion. I mean, granted, the Mercenary expansion is one of my favorite, but I'm interested in how many of these you can use mercenaries in your army. Well, that's useful and all. I don't know if they're worth the extra gold. I'd rather just use my army and spend money on maybe getting more victory points or getting extra gold per turn or some other form like that. But you have these charts, and that's basically how the campaign works. Each turn, you fight your scenario, generating it just like the random one I showed you. You pick, you go by this chart to buy buildings. You then see how much gold everyone gets, who wins the battle, how many victory points you get because of that battle, and you go to the next one. After 10 rounds, whoever has the most victory points wins the overall campaign. If I have a complaint about this expansion, which is basically just a deck of cards here, if I have a complaint at all, it's the fact that since I got it mostly for the scenarios, I felt like there's maybe not enough variety. Several of the scenario battlefields that are included are the same as other ones, and I know that that's there so that you draw a battlefield with nothing on it more often than not, but I wish there was more of those. I wish there was also more of the different kinds of campaign, different scenario objectives. I mean, there's enough, and I don't play the game all the time that I'll use all these probably anyway, but that would be my only minor quibble. Other than that, it works really well. The campaign itself, that's for diehard fans. If you're someone who wants to play 10 scenarios in a row, or I guess you could even spread them out over a long course of time, the rulebook talks about using a whole weekend to play. I don't have that sort of time to play on one game. So I might spread the campaign out over a period of time. But the scenario generator, that's worth it even for the casual player, because getting these different scenarios, it's kind of a break from, we got the same old flat battlefield, fight to the last man, same old units that we always use. I mean, the game already has a ton of variety anyway, but this adds more to it. Should you get it? Well, if you're a diehard player, play all the time, definitely. But then again, you already knew that before you saw this review. You're a casual player, if you want more scenarios and more randomness in how the game is set up, then yes, you should get it. But if you're pretty happy just playing pickup games here and there, then probably I would pass this one by. And, I mean, it's a good expansion, but it doesn't have a whole lot for you. This is more for people who play the game heavily.
Thanks for joining us today. For more written, audio, and video reviews, as well as the #1 board game podcast, check out the website at www.thedicetower.com. Until then, this is Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower.